Hello, everyone. Welcome. Welcome to our parenting workshop for the evening. Let everybody come in. Tonight's parenting workshop is titled Raising the New Generation of Children. My name is Dr. Alaina Puff. I'm a school psychologist and intuitive coach. So happy to have you here. Thank you for taking time out of your busy lives to be here with us this evening. Let's go ahead. It is time, so we're going to go ahead and jump right into it. Let's talk about our learning objectives for this evening. So by the end of this workshop, I really want you to be able to walk away with the following. I want you to understand and be able to identify common traits associated with this new generation of children. It can be an elusive term, new generation of children, but I really want you to understand some common traits that we're going to speak about and be able to observe in our kids. I want you to be able to assess whether your child presents with these traits. So are you raising one of these new generational kids? I also want you to be able to walk away with some clear and specific strategies on how to support your child moving forward. So I want to begin by introducing myself. I have over 10 years of experience working with kids and families. And really, when I look back from a very young age, I was always committed to working with children. And the reason for this is because I've always believed that children are the future and they're worth investing in. And so at this point, I have worked with children and families across a variety of settings, including hospitals, schools, community mental health agencies, and most recently in private practice. I have a PhD in school psychology, which this degree has afforded me expertise in child development and also how to support kids, not only in the context of schools, but also in their homes and communities. In my most recent experience working in private practice, I was working with all different types of kids and families from a variety of backgrounds. And what I began to notice was some common traits that my kids were presenting with that were really unexplainable by anything that I was familiar with. And so these observations, coupled with my own healing journey, I began to understand that this generation of kids looked a lot different than the kids from 10 years ago. And so with that, I kind of took to this idea that kids today are different and wired in a way than ever before. And so with that, I founded my business, Flow State Arizona, in November of 2023, dedicated to serving this generation of children. I also want to share that here is a photo of me, probably from when I was about 7 or 8. And I really want to share this with you because that little girl is part of the reason that I'm here with you this evening. She fuels my passion. And really, it was a highly sensitive and intuitive kid growing up. And so, part of my work and my mission is to help kids just like her feel fully supported, normalize her experiences, and support her every step of the way. So as we move through tonight's presentation, I want you to think about that little kid inside of you. And I want you to be able to embrace that fully. And so that you not only know how to support your child, but how to support yourself. Alrighty, so Laura, thank you. You have 3 children. Wow, what a spread you have. Amber Lynn, you have some teenagers. Stacy, thank you for being here. Mia, you got a 21-month-old. So sweet. Never too early. Wonderful. Awesome. Thank you so much for introducing yourself, guys. I appreciate it. So moving ahead, I'm hoping that regardless of the age of your children, or maybe you have no idea what to expect out of this presentation, I hope that you are able to walk away with a little more insight, regardless of their age, because this really does apply not only to children and adolescents, but across the lifespan. All right, so let me introduce myself since I'm joining here. My name is Dr. Alaina Puff, as I mentioned, and I have always been really passionate about working with children and families. From the time that I was a teenager, I remember always really being interested in how I could best serve children, because in my eyes, From a very young age, I always thought children are our future and they're worth investing in. And so at this point, I have over 10 years of experience working with children and family across a variety of settings. I provided support not only in the context of schools, but in hospitals, community mental health agencies, and most recently in private practice. So it has been just a wonderful opportunity to be able to serve these families across all these different settings where I was able to gain such beautiful, well-rounded experience. I do have my PhD in school psychology, so this degree afforded me the opportunity to really understand and study child development. So really understanding just those critical tenets that every child experiences, plus or minus, and really how to support families, not only in the context of schools, but also in the home and in the community to provide that wraparound of support to support their mental health needs, their academic needs, behavioral needs, and more. And so through my experience, I most recently was working in private practice. And after I was gaining experience working with different clients, I started reflecting on this like past decade of working with children. And what I began to notice was the children that were presenting to me in my office were very different than the kids from 10 years ago. Or maybe I was different, or maybe a mixture of the two. But what I noticed were the kids that were coming into my office were presenting as very perceptive to their surroundings and what I thought to be very sensitive, more sensitive than kids I had come in contact with before. And so I started running with this idea of what is this new generation of kids? What are they struggling with? What are their gifts or strengths? And that, coupled with my own healing journey, brought me to founding my company, which is Flow State Arizona Coaching and Consulting. And my center point of that entire business is around serving gifted, highly sensitive, highly intuitive children. And so that has just been my passion and something that is truly a dream to be able to carry out. With that being said, I like to show this picture of me. So this is me. I'm probably about 8 years old. And I share this with you because that little girl is a highly sensitive and intuitive little girl. And she is part of the reason that I am so committed to this work, because I think there are so many children out there that are needing these types of support. And so not only has this process been beautiful to be able to pour into my families, but also pour into myself and the things that I needed and as a young child. So with that being said, there's a little kid inside of each one of us, right, on this call. We were all children. That's our common thread, right? And so I want you to think of that little person inside of you and know that by listening to this information this evening, I hope that you can not only feel more empowered to pour into your children, but also pour into that little person inside of you. Okay, so now that we got introductions out of the way, I am so excited to share the meat of my presentation, which is around this new generation of children. Again, I kind of shared with you how my trajectory has brought me to this point where I have now dedicated my career to really understanding how to support the kids that are coming up in this day and age. And I'm hoping to start kind of broadband and give you a full bird's eye view, and then we can narrow it down into more specifics. So let's talk about the reality of being a child today. It ain't easy. It's not like when we were growing up, that's for sure. And so this is not an exhaustive list, but these are some common themes that I really see come up over and over when I'm working with my families who are raising young and even teenage children. So the reality is the structure of the family has shifted. I mean, just 40, 50 years ago, the family structure looks very different than today's times. Most people in most families are working, they're two-income households. The divorce rate, it talks about the split dynamics associated with a lot of families who are now sharing their children between 2+ homes. So this is really speaking to how our nuclear family, the way that many of us were taught when we were young, just inherently looks different now. For better or for worse, it's regardless. But I think it's really important to talk about how kids are being raised in these different structures, and we need to take that into consideration because there's some nuance there. In addition to that, it's undeniable to say the world that we're living in right now is full of conflict. It's very divisive. And so it's for highly sensitive or highly intuitive children, there is a trickle down effect that I see. So if parents are dealing with any kind of conflict inside, outside the home, related to economic or societal stressors, I have noticed that my child clients are directly plugged into that. Even if the parents are doing their best to kind of protect their children from that, these kids are able to sense that and kind of be plugged in to those points of stress. Um, I have to talk about the lingering ramifications from the pandemic. I mean, we all were impacted by that. And so, from an educational standpoint, I'm working with some school districts on just understanding the degree of learning loss that came from the pandemic. But beyond just academics, let's talk about the social losses that happen with our kids. These kids were coming up at critical points in development where they were now expected to sit at home at a computer all day, and they just didn't get access to the things that, their peers who were older had access to. And so honestly, the research is very inconclusive around the long-standing ramifications of that. And so I think we really need to take that into consideration, that, these kids missed out on a chunk of time that was very, very important. And there's nothing we can do to change that now, but there are ways we can intervene. The other piece that I want to talk about this evening is the emergence of social media and technology. I mean, I got like 24-month-olds knowing how to use an iPhone. I mean, it's just really undeniable that technology is here to stay. And our kids are often more savvy than we are with technology. At least that's what I'm finding. And so not only are they more attuned to the tech usage, but, as far as social media, while there's some positives as far as helping connect kids, accessibility to information, it's a double-edged sword, because also there is this habit forming around social media. There's peer pressures related to social media and trends. And so our kids are really steeped in this tech savvy world and trying their best to make sense of it. And the reality is, for most of us, we didn't grow up with this stuff. So as far as our personal context, we can't really relate to it. And so I talk with a lot of my families about how we can try our best to make sense of it and use it in a way that is appropriate, because it is here to stay, but it is impacting our children. And then finally, from an educational standpoint, I've really seen over the last few decades schools shift away from being places to cultivate a love of learning, a place and an outlet for creativity, to really being trickled down to this idea of performance outcomes. They want to know that, kids can get the highest test scores possible to produce these certain outcomes and have these certain credentials and accolades. And so I have spent a lot of my career in schools, and I have really have observed firsthand the extraction of creativity, the extraction of cultivating lifelong learners. And so I think that is something that, for a lot of kids that I've worked with, they don't feel safe at school. They don't like going to school. They don't have strong, meaningful connections at their schools. And so I think the ramifications of that are obviously significant, because they're not able to engage in the curriculum and in the social aspects associated with going to school. So all that to say, there's a lot of demands on our kids. And some of these are historically connected, have been going on for generations, but some of these are very much new. And so as mental health professionals, as a field of psychology, and as parents and advocates of children, we're all doing our best to make sense of this new world that we're living in. So let's talk about mental health for a second, because that's obviously my area of expertise and where I've spent a lot of my time studying. It's important to note that the data that I have on this PowerPoint slide is pre-COVID data. So take that as you will. This is all collected prior to the year 2020. And I'm sure if we were to extrapolate this data now, these numbers would unfortunately be higher. So it really shows that we have a mental health crisis going on in this country. So the most recent stats I was able to find is that 1 in 5 children ages 3 to 17 have some kind of mental, behavioral, or developmental disorder in the United States. 1 in 5. What that results to is over 20 million kids in this country have a diagnosis with a mental health disorder. That's a lot of kids. And what I've really seen through my own professional experience is that our system does not have the capacity to serve these children and their families. In fact, in many areas of the country, particularly rural areas, accessibility to care is virtually non-existent. Of course, telehealth has been a huge relief of that, but there are so many accessibility barriers, and simply stated, kids don't get access to the care that they ultimately need. And I think this really speaks to the crisis, because if we're not providing care to children, they're eventually aging up into adulthood and not having appropriate coping strategies to go ahead and contribute in the way we would expect them to. So again, I can't stress the crisis of mental health in this country. And part of the reason that I am so motivated and will continue to be motivated to redress this in our country and create a happier, healthy life for our kids. So that's where I come in. This is my hot take for you all this evening. I truly believe, based on my breadth of experience, that there is a new generation paradigm that explains what is going on with our kids. And this is what I have built my business around, and something that I truly believe in. So with that being said, it's important to note, just first and foremost, before I get into it, that every child has a unique set of gifts and abilities. So everyone on this call, when you were born and as you developed, you also have special gifts and abilities. I call it to kids their superpower. And we're all responsible for finding out what our superpower is and how we can harness that to make this world a better place. So with that being said, every kid has a superpower, right? And so when I was working in private practice and I was starting to work with all kinds of different kids from different backgrounds and different cultures and races, I started noticing that there was a common thread that linked these kids together. And the common thread was that they were highly perceptive of their environments. And generally speaking, kids are relatively perceptive. They talk about how kids absorb things like a sponge, but these kids were extraordinary at it. And so with that perception was a gift, but also a great responsibility, because what I noticed is that because these kids were taking in so much data around them, so much input from the classroom to the hallway, to the bus, to home, to a sporting event, to the grocery store, they were getting flooded with all this input from the world around them. And they had no coping mechanisms to help protect their own energy and their own sense of regulation from everybody else's. And so they developed and presented very sensitive, easily agitated, and we'll talk about some of these common traits a few slides ahead. But they became very sensitive to their surroundings, to the people around them. And so what then happened is that because their systems were so dysregulated and overstimulated, they started presenting with mental health symptoms. So they started presenting with hyperactivity, ADHD. They could not sit still in their chair, or they would completely zone off and not pay attention, common with inattention symptoms. Kids would withdraw and pull back away from their family or their peers, which is commonly a symptom of depression. They would be so anxious that they couldn't even go to school, or they couldn't interact appropriately, or they would act impulsively because their bodies were so dysregulated. Sensory sensitivities would come up where parents would say, I can't take my child to the grocery store because they'll have a temper tantrum in the middle of the aisle. So all these different mental health symptoms, which are 100% valid, but underneath the underlying course of that was really that these kids were wildly dysregulated. And when it comes to being highly sensitive, there was this psychologist named Alaina. She wrote a book in the early 90s around the highly sensitive person. It's kind of it's novel for its time. It was really the first time somebody looked at this sensitivity trait or characteristic and tried their best to understand like what's going on with that. Why is that? And if you look at the DSM, which is the manual we use to diagnose mental health disorders, sensitivity is not mentioned once in there. And that's where I kind of saw a problem in my treatment. Was I actually thought that having a sensitive system was actually a better explanation for what was going on with my clients. And so It's interesting that 1 in 5 children today are thought to be highly sensitive. Well, if we go back just one slide, go back for a second, look familiar? 1 in 5 children have some kind of disorder. So I put this together in the sense that, not saying that that necessarily overlaps, but I do believe, based on my professional experiences and the research that I have done, that highly sensitive children are more prone to developing a mental health condition for the reasons that I explained on this slide. To put it further, I wanted to use this visual to help you really understand this point that I am trying to make. So if we look at this picture of a tree, we can look at the leaves and the branches as the outward characteristics that help us understand what's going on. And so as it relates to our children, these are the diagnosable symptoms. These are the things that people are coming in to seek therapy or coaching for because their child is struggling with it. My child is afraid of sleeping in the dark. My child is having trouble regulating their emotions. My child is having tantrums, like you name it. Those are the things we can all visibly see and experience. And that's what modern psychology and mental health really was built around. You're coming in with a problem, we're here to fix it. However, why I stepped away and created flow state is because my approach is uniquely different. I'm not saying that those symptoms aren't valid, but I'm saying we're not getting to the root of the issue. And that's what I wanted to illustrate in this visual. The root of this issue is not that your child has ADHD or anxiety. The root of the issue is that your child is a highly intuitive and sensitive child. And those traits need to be directly nurtured in order for them to feel more regulated and ultimately to help those symptoms go away or remediate. And so this visual really helped a lot of people, including myself, really understand how treatment and care for these kids, the approach needs to be completely different. And even in my own clinical experience, I've treated the symptoms for years. I was trained as a PhD student to treat the symptoms. But what I found is that the kids didn't really get better. And it was because I was not getting to the heart of what I really needed to address with those children and their families. And that is their unique gifts and traits. All right, so let's take a quiz. Let's see if you've been paying attention. No, I'm just kidding. I'm not quizzing you on if you're paying attention or not. What I'm going to do is I'm going to drop a link in the chat, and this is going to take you to a quiz. And this is a free quiz. You're welcome to take it. Some of you I know on this call already have taken it. You're welcome to take it again. And this is a quiz that I developed for parents to assess whether or not their child is highly intuitive. And so it's going to ask you about 10 questions, and then it'll plug your email in at the end, and you'll get your results. And so I want you to take a few minutes to go ahead and click through those, and then we'll discuss your results. Oops. See if that one works, Whitney.
That one worked. I'll take it right now.
Okay, good. So like I mentioned, you're filling this out on behalf of your child. All right, I'll give you guys about another minute or so. It's okay if you don't get all the way through. When you're done, feel free, if you're comfortable, dropping your quiz results into the chat so we can see if we have some sensitive, intuitive babies in the house.
I have a quick question, Dr. Puff. What's the score out of 100 or?
Out of 100, yes.
Okay.
Okay, got some scores coming in. Oh, you guys are in the right place. You're in the right place. Wonderful. My question for the audience is, were there any questions on there that surprised you? Feel free to drop it in the chat, or you're welcome to unmute as well. But I wondering if anything in the quiz questions surprised you or kind of caught you off guard. Thank you.
I think some of the questions might have surprised me if we hadn't been like working with you for so long and I wouldn't have like already known some of this stuff, but
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yes, I have been working with you guys for a little bit, and I'm glad that you have a little more context now taking it again. And that's the reality, and why I created the quiz is because when I first was researching highly sensitive people and highly intuitive folks, I didn't know those characteristics were consistent with those traits. Like I never understood why I was really sensory sensitive, with my clothing or with being in loud places. And so for me, creating this quiz was to bring a sense of awareness that some of these symptoms or things you might be seeing in your children are deeply connected to their nervous system and to this trait of being highly sensitive and intuitive. And so I hope that by taking the quiz and filling out those questions, it kind of helps bring and shed light on these underlying contributors to what might be impacting your children. So let's talk about it a little bit. So some common characteristics, and this is consistent with what I have found in the research and then also my own professional experiences in kind of creating trends and understanding more deeply about what the highly sensitive or highly intuitive child is presenting like. And obviously, every child is different, right? So just pick and choose like what It might be apply to your child. It doesn't need to be all inclusive. They don't need to have all of these, but they need to have at least a few to probably be able to meet those markers. And so first and foremost, I kind of talked about this already in no particular order, sensory sensitivities. So 9 times out of 10, when I get a family who reaches out to me, they're having some kind of sensory issues at home. And when I say sensory issues, I'm speaking broadly, but it can really be a myriad of things. So it can be, I have to cut all the tags out of my son's clothing. I have to, be mindful when I take my daughter out to loud, large crowds. I have to, I had some younger kids really struggle with shoes when they were going to preschool and kindergarten. I had one client that used to wear, all she wanted to wear was slippers. So working with the family on, how do we get her to school in slide-on slippers? So just these sensory sensitivities are something that is very prevalent. And the reason for this, again, goes back to my initial explanation in the sense that our children who fall into this category are taking in all this information, and sensory information is one of the loudest or most prominent things that we take in as humans. And so if we're already absorbing all this information, something like the tag on our back of our shirt, that's something we're going to think about and feel for our entire school day. And that's where it gets really overwhelming and ultimately, in some cases, results in acting out behavior because the kids are like, I can't take it anymore. So that's one marker to kind of keep an eye on if that's something you're seeing in your kids. The other piece of it is our daydreamers and our imaginary friends. I had imaginary friends growing up, and I never thought this was connected to the fact that I was highly sensitive or intuitive. These kids are big thinkers and feelers. And so their creativity is off the charts compared to their average child their age. They are thinking of alternative worlds that might come out through their play or their art, or when they talk to you about, their dreams. Daydreamers and imaginary friends are good markers to show that your child is plugging into that creative aspect of their brain, and that is something that that needs to be nourished and validated, because that is something that we want them to be able to carry with long after childhood. The other common quality that I want to discuss this evening is my deep feelers. So my highly empathetic kids. This is probably one of the most common traits that I see come in for highly sensitive and intuitive kids that work with me. These kids feel so deeply. And this is where I go back to, that is actually their gift. I think that's something that we as a society are collectively emphasizing more about, creating space and room to feel our emotions rather than repress them or shove them down. And so this is where our kids are leading the way. They're teaching us as far as learning how to identify their emotions, express their emotions, then finally regulate their emotions. So one of the things that I see a lot with kids who are highly empathetic is they struggle differentiating their emotions from their moms, differentiating their emotions from the kid across them at the lunch table. And for children, again, being bombarded by all this information, I have to directly help kids differentiate, are these my feelings or are these someone else's, and how to protect themselves from that. Another characteristic that I see is that they are perceptive to the seen and unseen. So this is where almost like a sixth sense comes forward. I remember I was working with a family and they had a little boy, he was 6. And we were sitting there together with the parents and we were chatting, and he goes, Dr. Puff, I know what I'm going to get for my birthday. And I was like, oh, what are you going to get for your birthday? And the parents kind of looked at me like, we didn't tell him what we're getting him for his birthday. And he said it. And lo and behold, that's what the parents were getting him for his birthday. And I talked with them after. I was like, did you share that with him? And he knew. He just knew what he was getting. And then so it was kind of unexplainable in a lot of ways. But again, even just picking up on the most subtle cue in his environment, he was able to piece something together, even at the age of 6. And so these kids are so attuned to their environment in ways that we might not even fully understand. And so it's really important that if you have a highly sensitive or highly intuitive child, the idea of them absorbing things like a sponge times 1,000, because they are so attuned and aware of their surroundings. I put mental health disorders on here. I went over this pretty extensively a few slides back, but usually that's something that I screen for because, again, what I spoke about earlier is that this comorbidity of like being highly sensitive and having some kind of symptoms that align with a mental health diagnosis. So that's something that I just like to keep in mind because just because this child is highly sensitive, I still want to address those symptoms, and help give them tools and strategies to help mitigate those while we harness their gifts of being sensitive. And then the last piece is difficulty making and maintaining friendships. I have worked with a lot of highly sensitive kids that just really have trouble putting themselves out there or maintaining friendships. And I attribute this to many reasons, but the most common one that I experience is that, I don't know if you guys have ever heard people say, oh, that kid, he's an old soul. She's an old soul. That old soul mentality, that is very much that's characteristic of these children. And so these kids, because they're feeling so intensely and they're absorbing things so intensely, it's very difficult for them to connect with average kids their age. And so what I have seen is that translates into difficulty making friends, but also keeping friends. And they often feel, in the children that I have talked to, they feel like they're kind of straddling these worlds. They might prefer to be with adults. They might have trouble connecting to their peers. And so really my work is helping bridge that gap so that they can have friends their age, but also understand that they are wired differently to be able to connect with people even beyond their age. All right. So what do we do? What do we do with kids like this? And so this is something that, again, I have structured my entire business around, is helping support my families in nurturing these qualities within their children. And so I'm going to speak to you a little bit about kind of a beginner's roadmap of how to really support your highly sensitive or intuitive child. The first piece of it is education. We don't know what we don't know, right? We think that, our kids are having temper tantrums or meltdowns or feeling things so intensely. And a lot of the times we think that might be normal and it might be something that we don't address right away, or we try to use the resources and supports that we have. But the biggest piece of change that I have seen for my families are ones that are trying their best to understand better what is going on in their child. And that's by way of education. So there's a lot of resources out there. Again, this is something that I don't know anybody in my field, particularly speaking at the same concept that we're speaking about this evening. I think most mental health providers have some exposure to sensitive children, but again, I don't think it's enough, in my opinion. And so there's plenty of books if you research online, and I'm happy if you want to reach out to me, to provide you some resources. But I think knowledge is power, right? And so by understanding the experiences of our children, we can better know how to support them. The other piece of this that I haven't mentioned yet is that intuition and sensitivity is a heritable trait, meaning if they didn't get it from you, they got it from their other parent, if not both of you. And so what has been most fulfilling about this process is working with families where I'm not only helping them understand their child, I'm helping them understand themselves. Going back to the photo of me from my childhood, it has been so fulfilling in learning about this work to understand my experiences as a child and using that as fuel and testimony to help other people. So this is something that I think, as you're doing your own research and educating yourself on this, you should, in theory, be able to plug into a lot of what's out there. And that shared experience between you and your child is what is going to bond you through this next stage of the process, because you will not only be helping your child understand themselves, but you'll also be developing a better understanding of you. Outside of education, the number one strategy that I have seen such positive results is validation. And this is not groundbreaking stuff. Like we know we should validate our kids. Like generally speaking, that is pretty a commonplace strategy. But here's the difference. By educating ourselves, we can then validate kids' experiences and provide them strategies of support that we might otherwise not have thought of. So I have an example. I had a family who their daughter was struggling with pretty severe sensory sensitivities, and it was keeping her really afraid to like go out and be in the community. And so I was working with them on ways to support her. And the parents, were obviously very frustrated and they had tried all these things and they could not get their child out of the house. And they were really worried about her. They were like, how are we going to get her to school once school starts up? And kind of at a loss. And so by educating them on understanding what her experience might be looking like when she's afraid to go out of the house, instead of just dragging her out of the house, we came up with strategies that could help mitigate those fears that she was experiencing. So in this case, we got some noise canceling headphones and we started by having her take a few steps out of the house. And then we got her in the car. And then we backed the car down the driveway. And gradually we were able to get her back out and comfortable and helping her address some of those fears that she was experiencing because they were very real to her. So again, not only using the educational piece, but the validation piece, being patient with our children, understanding that they're figuring this out for the first time too. So we're all kind of feeling our way through the dark in some of these cases. And so that validation is so important because I think that helps build a sense of empowerment, which is the piece that I really want to emphasize. The goal is we want to communicate to our kids that there is nothing wrong with them. And there isn't. I truly believe, as a psychologist, there is nothing wrong with them. I think these kids are just wired in a very unique, beautiful way that we just need to uncover and help empower them to better understand their own superpower. And so the goal is that we, as the caregivers, the parents, the teachers, the support people in their lives, are giving them this validation and support. But eventually, they won't need us anymore. That's the goal of parenthood, right? Is to produce adults who can go into the world and do the things. So building that sense of empowerment, coming from a place of strength, a place of, this is your gift. I have seen kids be able to make like a flip of a switch to go from there's something wrong with me, Dr. Puff, to this is my gift, and be able to harness that as they move through life. So I want to be mindful of the time because I am going to leave some time at the end for questions, but I have a few more slides to get through. And this is one that I am very excited to share with you. So who do I work with? I hope by this presentation, you kind of got an understanding of the types of profiles of kids that I work with. The way that I work is not like a traditional therapist. And I realized when I made the shift from working in a traditional private practice to now doing this, my work is unique because the kids that I work with are unique. And so I wanted to share a couple case examples of some success stories of some of the kids that I work with and kind of what that looks like. So the first one I'll share with you, I worked with this 16-year-old boy and he came to me for anxiety and depression symptoms. He was really struggling, and most notably, he was a very talented pitcher for his high school, and he couldn't, his throw was all off. It was impacting his ability to make the varsity team, and it was creating a lot of stress with him. Also, in this case, his parents were splitting and going through a pretty high conflict divorce. So that was another like stressor that was definitely impacting him. And so the way that I use my approach is, the idea of coaching versus traditional psychotherapy is coaching is very action based. There were times where I saw kids for legitimate years at a time, and I didn't see progress. And I always say to people, if you're not seeing progress in therapy, there's a reason. It's time to try something different, or it's time to find somebody different. These things are things that can be addressed in short incremental periods of time. if approached in the right way, if we're getting to the root of the issue. So we had a 6 month container together with that family. And what I was really able to uncover was that this child was not only highly sensitive and a boy to boot with the societal pressures of being a boy, um, he was repressing all of his emotions around everything, school, baseball, his family. His parents had never heard of highly sensitive kids, had no knowledge of that. So a lot of this was educating the parents and normalizing his experiences. And then finally, regulating his nervous system. He was so dysregulated and uncomfortable in his body. And what happened was that was directly impacting his ability to pitch in baseball. And so by working with them over 6 months' time, what I found was his anxiety and depression symptoms pretty much went away. I worked with the family through their conflict of their divorce and was able to help them understand that, hey, you guys have your own thing going on, but your child needs you in this way. And so helping bring them on board, they were able to support him outside of our sessions. And obviously feeling better in his body allowed him to move through the world more seamlessly. The other example I want to share with you is a 8-year-old girl. She presented to me with social anxiety. So she was afraid of like going into social situations, really like withdrawn from her peers. She had ADHD symptoms. She was very impulsive, acting without thinking. And she had some pretty significant emotional outbursts, particularly at home. So what we saw happening was her grades tanked. There was lots of fighting at home, lots of power struggles, which I'm sure we're all somewhat familiar with here. And she was avoiding activities that she previously really enjoyed. She was in Girl Scouts, she didn't want to go anymore, the whole thing. So we had a 4 month container together where I was able to uncover that she was hyper empathetic, meaning she was absorbing all of her own emotions and others. And that was creating such a bodily dysregulation for her that she just wanted to withdraw via the social anxiety. And so we came up with some specific tools and strategies to help her regulate to feel better in these social situations. And she was able to go out and rejoin the activities that she had previously joined. I also was able to work with the parents on coming up with some strategies to mitigate the emotional outbursts. In this case, the home was very chaotic. There was a lot of stimuli going on, a lot of noises, a lot of things. And so helping them just do small tweaks in their home environment to build more calm and peace, the emotional outbursts went away. And then finally, I have a 10-year-old boy who came to me for school refusal. So he did not want to go to school. He had pretty significant separation anxiety from his parents, particularly his mom. And he was having some phobic fears. He was really afraid of the dark. And so what this resulted in is he had really poor relationships with his peers at school. He didn't have many friends because he wasn't there. He obviously had declined academic performance because he wasn't getting access to the instruction of school, and generally just had a really low sense of self-esteem. He just didn't feel like he was good at anything. And it showed because he kind of was pulling himself away from being able to be like a typical 10-year-old kid. And so just in that 3 months container of time, a lot of this was around parent education and helping parents understand that he was highly sensitive and highly intuitive, and how his gifts were actually impeding his ability to be able to go out into the world, and that school was a huge trigger for him. The other piece that was really amazing about this particular case is that I was able, given my knowledge of school psychology, I was able to partner with the school and work with his teachers and the staff to help educate them on what he was experiencing, and then designed a re-entry plan for him to return to the classroom. So again, one of the things that differentiates me from like a typical therapist is you don't get me just for an hour a week. I really get into the weeds with you, whether it's at a club organization or your school, your child's school, or in your home, to make sure that you have that full wraparound support. And so this was just a testament of being able to work with that school team to get him back where he belonged. So, as far as ways to work with me, I am so excited to be able to open up spots in my coaching practice to serve highly sensitive kids and their families. So those of you on the call today who would like to go deeper into this with me, maybe the information that I'm sharing, you're going, yep, that's my kid. Yep, that's my kid. Yep, that's my kid. I have a special gift for you today. So I am offering complimentary 30-minute consultations and where we can come together and discuss what's going on with your child or in your home and determine how I can support you. And so again, everyone on this call has the opportunity to book a free call with me in the next 2 weeks. And I'm happy to connect with you and speak more about what's going on from your vantage point. And a special promo is that if you book your call during this workshop today, I'm going to enter you into a raffle for a special prize. So a little extra incentive to go ahead and book this free complimentary consult call with me. I'm going to go ahead and drop the scheduling link into the chat. So feel free to click on that and go ahead and register. And as I mentioned, you'll be entered in a special drawing if you want to go ahead and book that now. Once your consultation call is booked with me, if this is something you're interested in talking about more, I'm going to send you over an application. And this is just an opportunity to get some more information about what's going on with your child before we meet. So I'll go ahead and send that over to your email. If you could just fill that out prior to our call, that'll be super helpful. And then, like I mentioned, on the actual consultation call, we will spend the 30 minutes exploring what's going on, what have you tried, and see how I can offer to support you moving forward. One of the things that I'm really excited about is most of my work up until this point has been one-on-one coaching with families, but I'm also opening a parent mastermind class. So for parents exclusively to come together in a group. I do believe that our work is best done in community. So I think we're all connected by raising these highly sensitive children. And so learning from each other, being able to connect with other people who understand your experiences is so powerful. So that's something that I am rolling out beginning August 1. And so that's just another opportunity that we can collaborate together. All right, I think I got through it in time. Yes, with 6 minutes to spare. I'm very proud of myself. I have my contact information on this final slide. Feel free to contact me via email. That is my direct phone number. Feel free to text me. And then I also included my website there where you can find out more information. I'm on all social media platforms, and I also have a podcast that's linked on my website. So I encourage you to check that out to get some more information. And then finally, this is the first workshop that I have done, but I'm actually going to be doing a series of workshops as part of my parenting masterclass. And so in those workshops, what we will be doing is diving into these specific traits that we discussed this evening with direct applications of support. And so this was kind of just a general overview, but moving forward, we will have access to be able to go a little bit deeper and understand how we can support our children in these specific areas. So thank you again for taking the time to connect with me today and follow along. I want to open it up to the audience should you have any questions or need clarification on anything. Anybody got any questions, or did I just do such a thorough job?
You answered it all, Dr. Puff. Did it all.
Thank you, Wendy. So glad to have you. Awesome. I do have a question in the chat. So someone asked, what are the early signs of highly sensitive children? This is a great question. I know there's a few of you on here with littles under 2. So for highly sensitive little ones, it is really common to see with that particular age temper tantrums. And I know you're like, wait, that's common of any 2-year-old. But it's important to begin to track what is happening right before those temper tantrums, because that is helping decipher. Temper tantrums are a way that our little ones, express their emotions in these big exaggerated ways. And so just being mindful of tracking what is going on around your child right before the temper tantrum, and then also noticing how you're responding to it. one of the things that highly sensitive children look for is they look for co-regulation. And so they want to see mom's regulated so I can be regulated. But oftentimes when your kid is screaming bloody murder, it's really hard to be regulated, right? And so it's important that with some of my families who have younger children, I'm helping build that co-regulation so that they can model and stay calm in those really heightened situations. So then the child can then self-soothe themselves quicker. Any other questions? Okay, I don't see anything else. Maybe someone in the chat. Yes, Laura, great question. She asked, would you suggest having these conversations with your kids about the superpower? And yes, absolutely. So, like I said, for strategies for parents, the same strategies are for kids. Education and empowerment. I think by sitting down and talking to your child about what this looks like, and that's also something that I could offer support in of like what this looks like at school and on the playground and on the car ride home. But talking to your child outwardly about this is so powerful because it normalizes their experiences. Like I said, kids are figuring this out for the first time too. So by coming to you, their trusted parent, you being able to help explain that and normalize that creates such relief in your child, or at least that's what I have seen. And so that is the first step in the conversation. And then from there, you can talk with them and have very open conversations about, hey, when we were in the grocery store and you had a meltdown, what was going on in your body? What were you experiencing? And if they don't go, I don't know what was going on, you go, well, why don't next time we think about what's going on in our body when we're feeling sad or frustrated? And so you can begin to cue them so they build that awareness. And then that way you can understand each other a little bit better. Hope that answers your question. There's a lot I could say on that one for sure, but perfect. Yes. Okay, wonderful. Are there books you recommend if we are in the educational phase? Yes. So one of the things that I will do following this workshop is I'm going to send you all an email with some additional resources. I've kind of curated a list. Resources for parents to read. There's actually some wonderful children's books that have come out that speak directly to these traits in your children. And so I have a few in my library that I use often with the kids that I work with. They're mostly for like elementary age children, but I think it does a wonderful job of explaining and normalizing some of these traits in a very like friendly way that can help kids understand, oh, well, I'm not the only one like this. It takes away that otherness feeling. So I'll be sharing those resources with you all in a coming email, probably in the next week or so. All right, let's do one more question because I want to honor our time this evening and get my East Coasters off to bed, hopefully. I have an overly emotional child who is also really negative. Everything is bad. Yes. End of the world. What would you have fallen a sensitive? Yes. So that end of the world, my mom could probably speak to this. As a kid, I would always say, my life is over. Very dramatic. I loved the drama. And so that dramatic thinking, we attribute to that, oh, you're just being dramatic. But the reality is that for some of our kids, they do feel so intensely that they believe like the sky is falling down. And so one of the things is like, as parents, we might reframe and go, the sky isn't falling down, it's fine. But it's actually really powerful to validate that experience, even if it's not reflective of reality. Wow, you must be feeling a lot of really intense emotions to feel like the sky is literally falling down. I'm wondering what we can do to help soothe ourselves for a few minutes before we reevaluate the situation. So a lot of the times, because kids feel so much positivity, but they can also feel so much negativity. So you're kind of on this opposing end of the spectrum. And we don't want to get rid of that, right? We want kids to feel deeply, but we want them to be able to have strategies to get them regulated back to that middle more often than not. So they're not just toggling between the two ends. Hope that helps. Okay. All right, everyone. Well, thank you again. I really appreciate it. Like I said, feel free to book a consultation call with me. I'd love to connect with each and every one of you to chat more. And as a reminder, if you booked on this during this call, I'll extend it for the next 15 minutes or so to give people time. I will be entering you into a special drawing with an amazing prize that I have put together for you. So again, thank you. I hope you were able to take something away, and I look forward to seeing you all in the future. Bye, everyone. Take care.
Bye, my girl.
Bye, Mom.